So let me ask you a more narrow question, which is, what can, for many libraries, open access is, the librarians would say it's everyone's issue, but the reality is a lot of time it's the library's issue primarily. What could libraries do that would be helpful to promote open access? What do you think is working, what's not working, what should change in the way libraries approach open access?
I have an analog that I could talk about that, and since I work with the government, there are two kind of strategies in terms of opening up data and information access to it. And one is to, let's catalog and collect everything we have and make sure everybody knows where it is. And that's a huge labor. And by the time you get done with it, the organization or the stakeholders usually are so tired of it that it ends up failing. There's a different way, and it's very, very focused and narrow, only on high value, highly sought after data sets or information. And so if libraries broadly were to really selectively focus and really just do one discipline extraordinarily well, and get it all out there, and you'd see the advantage. You get some high wins out of that, of people using it. They see how, hey, this pays off. A more focused instead of comprehensive. Librarians tend to look at everything. Here's the collection. I want to index it all. And I think that is not necessarily productive towards a successful open access environment.
So we should have smaller but more useful journal collections?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Christy, do you have anything to say? You look like you're going to say something. Christy handles the health sciences serials budget. So.
I was thinking about the library's role in trying to help educate about open access. It really doesn't sound like the journals are perceived as having as stringent peer review processes and so forth. And we know some of them have very high impact factors and other measures. And I'm going back to the comments at the beginning about dissemination of the research and the impact it has over 1,000 times for your software. You talked about the Yelp stuff. I think maybe we should push that for a particular discipline just to show how much open access has opened up the whole environment for sharing information and then encouraging all this interaction.
Raw outcome measurements would go far. If you can cry out and say, this is the level of impact that we've had, or this is the saturation we've had because of these efforts, that would be very beneficial.
For example, a rep from Biomed Central recently showed us how they're adding altmetrics to their articles and suggested that you show someone their article in a Biomed Central journal and then show an altmetric measure for someone very big in their field to see how many more hundreds or thousands of views it had, and try to advocate for that.
Are there, I think in general, biomed disciplines are the ones where this is perhaps most immediately useful. But within that, are there particular subjects within that big tent where an approach like that would be particularly helpful?
I think so. I mean, public health, the public health fields, for instance. I think it's hooking into what Justin said before about really trying to maybe focus on information that will make a difference to people's lives and really have a strong impact.
And perhaps that would work hand in hand. We are state universities are under more and more pressure to show value, and sometimes that's easy to do and sometimes it's more difficult. But this might, one of the things that makes me somewhat optimistic about open access is that it is a way to show value, and it leads to more ways to show value in time. And public health is a great example of that. It's really a shame how often we can't open up research and data in public health.
But it's partially because of how the paradigm shifts a little bit, and how once you open something up, you can't necessarily say, that was me.
Yeah.
That was us, that was UNC, or that was NCSU. It's more difficult to show contribution, so we have to develop other ways to demonstrate impact other than we conducted this study and it reported this, and that is of obvious value to the community. The paradigm's got to change. We have to measure some sort of collaborative focus, and we get to figure out how to capture that.
So in the what you're saying, if I understand correctly, is we at UNC do a study, we write some articles, it's all open, other people use it, and at that point, our contribution is stronger, but is somewhat diluted. Our brand is diluted.
It might seem diluted because you've spread it out, and you'd have to figure out a way to develop partnerships with those people using that information, and not necessarily attribution or anything like that, but just really say, okay, great, you're interested in that question. Gosh, so are we. Let's do it together, or whatever. There are ways to, I would think, that you could possibly leverage things. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's also, if I may interrupt, that's also part of the NIH approach with these archives.
Right.
That they put whoever wants to use some data, they'll put them in touch with the investigators that collected that study to see if any of the investigators now want to collaborate with this new person, because they may have had the same idea, not having had the time to do it, but they have, they would be willing to collaborate with somebody else, and it's a win-win situation in that sense. So that's part of why they don't make it, they just don't publish the data so that anybody can download it and do anything. You have to go through a process of reaching it.
And that encourages the collaboration. Yeah.
Right.
Hillary, we're sort of leaving you out of this conversation, and I wondered if you had things to add, sort of from the humanities and social sciences side of the coin.
I think it's a bit of a different issue in that in the humanities there's that, like I said, the sense of immediacy of research getting out and open is not always there. I think that there are a lot of different forms of research published in the fields of humanities, like monographs, books. Publishing books is still very big, where articles are sort of bigger in the science fields, and it's a kind of a different animal in that area, and I'm not really sure, how to fix those disparities.
Do you think that there is not much of a need in the humanities for open access? I mean, and by that I don't mean, it's not a life-saving type situation, but just the need for, say, literary criticism or what have you.
Maybe not. And as someone who loves that area of research myself, I don't want to say that's because there is less value in the research itself that it doesn't need to be open to the public. But if there is less demand from the people in the field and the researchers for the open access publishing, then that might be a sign that they feel that things are working as they are now.
On the other hand, I for many years worked for the state of Ohio, and I worked with universities and colleges at all levels, from the poorest, littlest community college in the coal mining areas to Oberlin College and largest universities in the state, and I was often taken aback by the lack of resources at the two-year colleges, including people who just had access to almost nothing. I had an embarrassing moment once when I went to visit a library. This was a campus in community college campus in southern Ohio. They had 3 branches. I went to the biggest branch. They had one room with some books in it. Most of the books looked like they come from a yard sale. I said, "Do you have some more books in another room?" And he said, "No, this is all we have." And they had nothing. And so that made me, I think at that point I realized that even in this country, there are an awful lot of humanists who don't have access to so much after all.
Yeah, I think maybe some, repositories that are, big repositories like NIH. There's, not that I know of a body that has that same kind of authority to, push researchers in the field to.
Yeah, NIH doesn't award the same dollar level of grants by any means, for example. Yeah. Other questions from either from panelists or from others who are here?
What do you see as the future of open access and policy? Because I know that a lot of things are changing. Do you see any drastic change in any of it, or what do you envision happening within the next, 5 years or so?
I am very interested in this theory that actually I found from 2 researchers here at UNC in library science called the decoupled journal scheme, where it's sort of breaking down the process that, say, a journal holds over you, submit it, and they copy edit, and they peer review, and they print it, and they market it, and breaking that down into multiple services so that researchers and authors have the opportunity to go to, different people who offer these different services. They get a little more flexibility in the entire process. I think that's interesting. I don't know what the first step towards that would be, because the publishing model that we have is, so very entrenched. So.
I think there are certain fields where it probably makes sense for the journals to completely open. And you've seen this from time to time, that some of the library science journals have done this, and I can name a journal here and there in other fields, but ones that are important but not big are, I think, sometimes a good candidates for this, and this may be a place where libraries or various IT centers on campuses will sponsor, at least to a degree. And so I think that is going to happen more and more. There's certainly an interest in experimenting with library journal publishing in certain cases. I think public health is really an area where there's a lot of sort of mounting frustration about needing more openness in many, many places too. So that may be a place where we see movement.
I would think that open access will change a lot over the next 5 years, depending on what purposes we imagine it's going to serve. So you could imagine that open access will look a lot different if the primary purpose is to benefit the researcher as opposed to the public good, as opposed to the university, as opposed to the the aggregators of data, right? So which of the stakeholders ends up getting the market share of the attention that open access is going to, the benefits that open access is going to provide them? I think that's still a big question. It's certainly a big question in the government in general. Who benefits the most from releasing tons of data? Well, businesses that can do the analytics on it. So not the public citizen, not really, unless we build tools for them. And so if our focus is really about the public, then there's a lot more work we have to do. And so I think open access is similar to that, that issue of who's interested, and can we serve multiple interests simultaneously? Maybe, but some careful thought is going to have to happen to make sure that happens.
Yeah, I think you sort of hit on the important point of who is benefited by open access, but then we should probably look at the other side, who loses out if there is open access. And the way I think of this is publication. I'm not talking about the data at this point, but data I think is a little bit different from publications being open access. But publication today are a big business, and all the editors or publication companies are in the business of making money. They're not in the business of providing access to anyone for free. They are for profit. They are not altruistic whatsoever. So they, as long as it continues to be a big business, it is going to be very difficult to have. Reason it is so profitable to be a journal publisher is because it's sort of a vicious circle. Everybody wants to get their research out, and for many different reasons. There's lots and lots of articles written, and so every week I get an email from some news journal that is inviting papers. So there's lots of journals that are in this business because it is profitable. And so as long as it continues to be that people need to publish to further their careers and to get important information out, it's going to be a big business, and there's money in it, and therefore they're going to charge a lot. It's not going to be free open access. It's going to be very expensive open access. Yeah. And so that's the I think sort of a hard, unfortunate rule that money is what's making this be very difficult. I think all of us would like transparency. All of us would like our information to be out there, to be, if it's useful for others, it's very helpful. You want to also have people know how things were done, so you want full transparency, but it's costly. And so as long as it's costly, it's going to be very difficult to do.
Right, and at the same time, a lot of these publishers deliver expensive but excellent value to the libraries. As we were talking yesterday, some of these publishers have the lowest cost per use, and they are used extensively for a reason. That their customer service is excellent, except for the part where we get the bill, which is hard. Always hard. So I think some of you have indicated more cautious optimism than others, but I wondered for the rest of you here, how do you feel? Do you feel optimistic about open access, pessimistic, mixture? Brenda, you seem always optimistic.
Well, I think that especially when it comes to public health and health issues, we're becoming a global environment, and I see that because we're in this world that we want everyone to have access to everything. And I mean, look at with this whole thing with Ebola and all those health things that are happening in the world, that I think people are going to see the need to this research to be accessible to everyone. But it is true when I think about the cost that we tend to promote open access journals, but we tend to forget the cost that this brings to researchers, and the fact that if there was a way of having to deal with those costs or make them go away, that would basically make things better. But I know that that's not going to be the easy answer for that. But I think with technology and everything changing so fast, there's probably going to be ways of getting the research out there to people, getting data. I know that now it's a big thing about data analysis and open data. Technology is making that accessibility easy to do in storing that information. And I think with that kind of research and getting that information out there, there's a way of, look what we've done in the last 10, 20 years and how accessible information has been. So I think in the next 20 years, some of the issues that we're talking about would be other issues because, we might have access to that information, but then the issue might be accessibility to it, that the information is going to be there, but how the people will get access to that. Because when we think about, a lot of countries in Africa, they have limited access to the internet and resources, but some of the information is already there. I have a friend in Nigeria that, she tends to contact me once in a while that they wish that they had more access to the internet because they, Hinari and all those things are there, but because of the technology difficulties that they're dealing with, they don't have access to those resources. So I think that with technology and all those advances, we'll find new ways and better ways of getting that information out there and realizing that it's not about privacy issues, it's more like accessibility and letting that information be shared, because that sharing that information and that data creates more new inventions, new ideas that can come up with that. So I'm hoping that it would be it's a positive, change that's coming. It's a slow one because change doesn't happen that quickly. But I think in the long run, we'll see more of this being the law of the land kind of a thing.
Any of the rest of you pessimistic, optimistic? You were optimistic yesterday, Christy.
Yeah, I'm still optimistic. I'm hoping that open access will become more mainstream outside the biomedical sciences. I know that, again, Biomed Central is opened up a whole new portal, Springer Open, for the purpose of trying to cover some of the other scientific areas. And I think, that will be good. I was just thinking about costs of things and the fact that Biomed Central is making 6 hybrid journals totally open access in 2015, including the very big journal Genome Biology. I'm worried that it's great for a library not to have to pay anymore to get any of that content. I'm afraid the burden has shifted to the researcher paying, and so I'm not happy about that. But I think we just need to look at how to support this, because I know that the article charges are a huge obstacle for many, and so rethinking the whole economics and seeing who's looking at the models that are coming up that might have some promise.
I'm interested to see how that plays out too, because once the users are charged, there's a whole politic of I'm only going to use the stuff that's easily accessible, And I mean, I know a lot of researchers go out and get high value things, but the general population may not. And if their whole model is built, you will not. And if their whole model is built off of getting money, right? And only a few very highly motivated and able people can actually afford to do that, then they diminish the value of their product overall. Certainly they've thought of this, but I'm interested to see how that shapes up.
I'm mostly optimistic. Part of my pessimism, though, is you just hit upon diminishing value. You can make everything open and everything free. Where is the value? Right now it's equated with money and quality, although they're not good connections to have, but that's kind of how it is now. And so with everything free and available on the internet, if scholarly publishing does move in that direction, then I think it kind of diminishes the value of the content for the consumer, for the masses, if it's now suddenly free.
So we have just a few more minutes, and I wondered if any of our panelists I started to say last words, but last words for this panel, not last words forever, before we sign off. Well, I'll start. And just say that one of the things I wonder is whether there will be somewhat of a return to a more informal way of communicating research. You see this in some areas where preprint servers have gotten more popular, SSRN, Archive, etc. But if that will be a way that, and you also see that in the colleagues who contact you and ask you to email you a PDF. And that's certainly going on sometimes on really large scales, but that some of those kinds of coordinated projects like Archive will sort of quietly supplant the formal journal in many or maybe just a few, but perhaps in many areas.
I think we need to move away from saying it should be open just because it should be, and making sure that we are opening it for a reason. And I, again, take this back to my government stuff, but there's a big movement about opening the information because it's important, and we're just going to open it all up, and we're going to put it all out there, and then our job's done. And the job's just begun. How do you manage it? How do you understand it? How do you retrieve the information? I mean, there's so many questions that get put in. So it's more important to make sure that the stuff that we're putting out there broadly is usable and efficient, and it's moving towards some sort of grand, benefit, and not just clog the wires underneath the ocean with lots more data transfer. We want to make sure it's open for a reason is all, and that it's working towards some larger picture, rather than just getting it open to make it open.
I have hopes that as new generations of researchers come up, that the idea of altmetrics will sort of partner with open access and drive it more, that new researchers will find new ways to share their own research and to new ways of impacting not only researchers in the area but the general public come about, and increase the value of being able to openly share.
Any final thoughts?
Yes, I think I'd like to sort of separate out the data being free access as well as the publications,
right,
from the publications being free access. I think the data being free access is more important and useful, because I think it goes with what our student colleague in the middle, I don't remember your name.
Sorry,
Kreft, Justin Kreft.
Said, and that is to make it out there so people can, it can all be transparent, and the research can be verified and validated by others. I think that's important. And one of the things that I don't know if this is a crazy solution, but one possibility is that, there are so many publications these days, and not everything is of high quality. And I think and it's because of this, vicious circle of publish or perish and all the other issues that go along with it. And maybe open access should probably be a prize as opposed to an obligation, because we don't want to have open access to junk research. Maybe what we should do is have the journals, suggest to the journals, you choose the 5 or 10 papers that you think are such high quality that have an impact and should have an impact, and make those freely open access as a way to show these were the best papers that we published this year. And it would help the journals, because the journals would then have more people quoting them, and their citation index would go up and all these sorts of things. But only have the really good stuff be open access. And that would maybe be an interesting paradigm to work with.
Well, I appreciate that idea. Are there any last questions? If not, thank you very, very much to all three of you for being on the panel, and I think you've all given wonderful, wonderful ideas, and I've been very pleased to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.